Okay. Hi, everyone. We're almost at well, it's 6 o'clock for me, 8 Eastern time. I am Jessie. I am the sales manager at Naturalist Journeys. And I am happy to present Carlos Sanchez's presentation tonight for our new Brazil tour of the Atlantic Forest. We previously had a bit of that as an extension for a Pantanal tour. Um, but we've turned it into a full trip, and it's a great itinerary. It's so different from other places in Brazil that we visit, and I think you'll really enjoy tonight's presentation. So I added a message into the chat box here, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and we'll answer everything at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Carlos.
Hi everyone. So I'm Carlos Sanchez, of course. Think I've traveled with some of you. I see Elizabeth Stone and Laura Button, for example. Um, I've been guiding with Naturalist Journeys since I believe 16 now, and I've led approximately maybe 10 tours to Brazil far. So Brazil, I've been going to Brazil since about 2013, sometimes two or three times in one year. It's a wonderful country, probably my favorite country for bird watching in South America, precisely because it's so different from, the Andes. Totally different species composition. Without further ado, let's dive right in. This new itinerary, it's due for 2025, Jewels of the Atlantic Rainforest. It focuses on the Atlantic rainforest of Brazil. The Atlantic rainforest is very precious habitat. It basically formally extended about 1,000 miles up the coast, basically from about Paraguay, northern Argentina, all the way to northeast Brazil. This here is a Surucuá trogon, which means so Surucuá is the Tupi word for trogon, so it literally means trogon. So here's a little bit of an introduction of Brazil, just to give you a bit of overlay of the land. Brazil is a giant. It covers two-thirds of the continent of South America, bigger than all of the other countries in South America combined. Um, it's bigger than all of Southeast Asia and India combined. It's huge. It's bigger than the continental United States. The only reason the United States is slightly big is because of Alaska. It's also a country of immigrants, just like the United States. I know many of you probably are familiar with sort of the African slave trade. So Brazil accepted within its territory it's a staggering number of African slaves, mostly from Angola, during Portuguese rule. So it's definitely left an enormous imprint on the culture of the country. But Brazil's, like the United States, is a massive melting pot. So it has the largest population of Japanese outside of Japan. It has the largest population of Italians outside of Italy, the second largest population of Germans outside of Germany. And as we're traveling through on this itinerary, you'll notice the structure, the architecture of a lot of the places we visit, we stay at, have almost a Swiss, almost Bavarian feel to them, precisely because, the Europeans also left a huge, and continue to leave a huge imprint on the culture and sort of the ethnic fabric of Brazil. So together with African slaves, the indigenous people, which are mostly the Tupi, some Guarani, it forms the Brazilian national identity, just a huge melting pot of peoples. It's also highly biodiverse. It has 1,800 species, so that makes it the third most bird-rich country in the world. And it has the most endemic birds of any country in the Americas, not just because of its sheer size, which is impressive, but also because many ecoregions, many habitats are found wholly within the country of Brazil. Things like here in the Northeast, the Cotinga in this like sort of orange color, that's sort of a dry, desert-like environment. Here you have this purple here is the Pantanal, which you have a very wonderful tour that visits. If you haven't been to the Pantanal, I highly recommend it. Um, the Atlantic rainforest is this sort of light bluish green color. You can see how it extends about 1,500 miles all the way from the subtropics here down south near Paraguay and northern Argentina, stretching up along the coast all the way to northeast Brazil, catching those trade winds. And the size of the Atlantic rainforest over geologic history has varied. So this sort of you see this lighter yellow color, the Cerrado, which is a tropical savanna habitat, which is also highly endangered because of agriculture. Basically, this savanna-like habitat is what divides the Atlantic rainforest on the coast from the Amazon basin rainforest in the interior. And so that's why Atlantic rainforests, the biodiversity, the bird life, is very different from the Amazon. However, occasionally, as we've had the ice ages, this Cerrado habitat grows in size, the continent dries out. So the Amazon's smaller, the Atlantic rainforest recedes into pockets. But, during the warming trends, the Cerrado almost disappears. The Cerrado sort of the continent gets wetter, and so there's an exchange of species. So actually quite a few species are found in the Amazon and the Atlantic rainforest, but as different species. So for example, you'll have the yellow-bellied turquoise tanager in the Amazon basin, and then on the coast you'll have turquoise tanager, but they'll have white bellies. And I think with genetics, as we're looking into these, they've decided to split some, but they're sister species, or at the very least, or just subspecies. They haven't been divided for that long. So that's a bit of an overview of the sort of major ecoregions of Brazil. And then we're gonna dive it into the Atlantic rainforest. This beautiful little bird is a green-headed tanager. The Atlantic rainforest formerly extended about 1,500 miles along the coast. However, of that, basically the Atlantic rainforest, with the arrival of European colonization around the year 1500, it's basically eaten away at this Atlantic rainforest. Only about between 8 to 10% of this habitat actually remains, which amazingly, there are no confirmed, there probably are one or two that I think are like there's one bird called the kinglet calyptera that hasn't been seen in decades, but we'll say at most one or two birds have gone extinct in the Arctic rainforest. Amazingly, out of the 900 species that occur in this biome, this ecoregion, maybe one or two have gone extinct, despite the almost apocalyptic levels of deforestation. It might be testament to the fact that these birds have survived ice ages. These rainforest pockets receded into these tiny, areas, and the birds are just sort of adapted or used to it at some level. The Atlantic rainforest was the first thing the Europeans saw when they arrived. Actually, the name Brazil is actually derived from a tree called the Brazilwood tree or pau Brasil, which was heavily exploited for its red dye to near extinction, but it was so important that it actually gave the name to the entire country. So the country Brazil is named after a tree. So after we arrive in Rio de Janeiro. On the first full day of birding, we visit, the Botanic Gardens. So the Botanic Gardens, this is the premier botanic garden of South America. It has the largest collection of botanical prints. Botanical library is very extensive, the largest in Brazil. It's very old. So actually a lot of this botanic garden is secondary forest. It's steadily regrown after decades. It's also very old. So it was founded in the year. It was created initially to advertise spices being grown in the West Indies, such as cinnamon, pepper, nutmeg. Houses over 6,000 species of plants. So your introduction, very nice, easy introduction, relatively flat, beautiful botanic gardens. You'll basically get exposure to a lot of the really common garden birds of Brazil, of Southeast Brazil. And that's always exciting. It's always exciting seeing what are the common birds for the city dwellers of any given location. So some of the common birds in part of the world include, the blue dacnus. If you've been on the Pantanal extension, you probably saw many blue dacnus at the Hotel do Ipê. Always beautiful to see. Here's an endemic rufous-headed tanager, also, which is the third bird. And in the middle, we have this very large hummingbird. It's called the swallow-tailed hummingbird, which isn't necessarily tied to the Atlantic rainforest. It's quite adaptable, so it'll live in the Cerrado as well. It's kind of the most common, widespread, familiar hummingbird for Brazilians, and it's absolutely gigantic. It's actually a really, really big hummingbird. Think maybe like saber wing size. So about approaching the size of a house sparrow. So it's pretty big for a hummingbird. So after our sort of introduction into the Botanic Gardens of Rio de Janeiro, we take a drive about north east to Régua. So Régua is basically owned by NGO. It's a private reserve that was basically created from Locke family. Purchased it in 1907. It used to be called Fazenda Carmo, and it was founded by, this farm was originally created by Carmelite monks who basically traversed this sort of region from Rio de Janeiro, the city, up through the watershed of Guapiaçu, or the river, which we can see part of here in this image. And so they settled the land for forestry, for growing sugarcane, and then it was bought by the Locke family. After some time, it was in 1995, there was basically an avifauna survey done over the property. And from there, they found out that this was a very bird-rich, biodiverse sort of lowland rainforest. So it was decided to create an NGO in 2001. And from there, they basically created a lodge with the aim of financial sustainability. So it's very common in lodges all over South America. They're attached to sort of private NGO lands, just like Colombia with ProAvis or the Jocotoco Foundation in Ecuador. You'll have these private reserves, and they'll try to be financially stable by having a lodge that attracts bird watchers, but also scientists. So Régua is heavily studied, has associations with over 20, 30 educational institutions, or many scientific papers done here. So it's not just a lodge, it's also a research station to better understand the Atlantic rainforest. So, some of the birds here at Ragua, you have this saw-billed hermit. This is little, it's another large hummingbird endemic to the Atlantic rainforest, which has little sort of not sort of little indentations that look like teeth inside its bill. Not quite visible here, but then we have blonde crested woodpecker, which is absolutely stunning, beautiful, absolutely beautiful woodpecker species. Quite common in the Atlantic rainforest, even in Sao Paulo and some of the bigger city parks. And spot-billed toucanet. So lots of toucans in the Atlantic rainforest. This is probably one of the showier ones. We'll probably see, maybe 4 or 5 species of toucan over the course of the trip. So one of the main Asian reasons to stay at Ragua for a lot of bird watchers is to see giant snipe. So giant snipe isn't exactly tied to Atlantic rainforest, but all the best sites to see this bird species happy in Atlantic rainforest. And Regua is a traditional, pretty reliable site to see this species. I've seen them a couple times. They're absolutely amazing. They're at least cool looking. So once we finish at Regua, we take a drive Serra dos Orgãos, highest mountain ridge of Rio de Janeiro, just north of the city, not too far as a crow flies. It has some really nice upper montane Atlantic rainforest. Due to being a bit of a skyline, due to its elevation, it has a few species that are found nowhere else, and one of which is this gray-winged, this dull green bird, is the gray-winged Cotinga, which has a very simple but loud call, sort of a whistle. The gray-winged Cotinga is special because it's found only in 2 mountain ranges. This happens to be one of them. And it was basically only described in the year 1980. It's very recent. And that's actually quite common in the Atlantic forest. There's a lot of bird species that only have been described within the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Some of them, like there's been ant wrens discovered on the outskirts of Sao Paulo as recently as the 1990s. So one of the great large megalopolises of the world, and there's birds undiscovered just within hours drive outside the city. This highlights how biodiverse and how special this area is. You have so many species that are particular to these very small sites. So, after we finish in Serra dos Orgãos, we take, it's a bit of a drive. It's a few hours drive from Serra dos Orgãos to National Park, but we stay at Hotel Donati, which is in a lower elevation area of the national park. Either way, amazing feeders, great for photography. During our stay here, we'll bird the area between Donati and Ipe for Atlantic rainforest species of mid elevation. It can be, since we are approaching the tropics around this area, I highly recommend taking a heavier, clothing, a heavier sweater, a jacket. It can be quite cold at night. It can drop into the 40s. So that's something to keep in mind as we visit the area. On another day, we visit the Agulhas Negras Road. which is basically a highland road that traverses. It starts in Atlantic rainforest. You see all sorts of tanagers and like brassy-breasted and gilt-edged tanager. We see plover crest, which is a kind of hummingbird. As we traverse through this area, we eventually get to higher elevations where we see the Araucaria forest or monkey puzzle trees, as some of you may know them. So these ancient conifers. And here, more specialized species like the Itatiaia spinetail, the Araucaria tit spinetail, and we continue all the way up to tree line, where we traditionally have a nice picnic lunch on the Agulhas road. It's a really great birding road. We basically, as we're driving, we'll walk a few hundred meters with the bus behind us. If anyone gets tired, we can stop. They can go in the van. It's really easy, really pleasant birding. Nice open road. Not busy at all because the road doesn't connect to anything. So here are some photographs that I've actually taken at Hotel do Ipé. As I said, great opportunities for photography. So when you're not birding or we're not and you're taking photos, there's over 40 species of birds visiting the feeders at Hotel do Ipé at any one time. Also Hotel Donati has feeders. So I mean, it could be anything. Here we have magpie tanager, white-throated hummingbird, and dusky-legged guan. But we can also have like Brazilian ruby, a type of hummingbird, blue dacnus, black-goggled tanager, red-breasted toucan, or green, sometimes known as green-billed toucan. Just a bevy of interesting birds constantly flying in and out. If you're really lucky, there might be some wood quail. Just a great place, just very relaxing to just hang out and see what's coming in. And lots of them are endemic and not found anywhere. So to Ecuador, Colombia, maybe I'd say about at least half the birds here would be new, even just from the feeders. So this is our group from a few years ago that did the extension. This is at the top of the nearest road. They had just finished their picnic lunch and we're just hanging out. I think we were looking for some kind of sparrow here. Oh yes, it was a pampa finch. It was a great pampa finch, which we did get to see. So we leave the cold environs of Itatiaia National Park and we continue south to the historic town of Paraty, Paraty Mirim. So this is a pretty old town, and we get to spend some basically a nice afternoon just exploring the town. We also have a really cool sort of boat trip up what's called the Saco de Mamangua. It's described as a tropical fjord. It's not a fjord in the traditional sense, but it is spectacular. Going up this waterway with mountains flanking on either side. You could see an image here, sort of get a feeling of the fjord from a distance. And this is a traditional sort of scene in Paraty, sort of the town with the whitewashed homes. There is something Paraty, it's a lowland site and sort of this really perfectly round bay. And here there's a site called Pereque, which is not very large. Not very large, wet lowland rainforest. And it happens to be home to the black-hooded ant wren, which is only found in this tiny little part of the state of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So just yet another one of these highly endemic, endangered birds found in just a very particular site. Also very flat, very comfortable road for birding. Not a very big site. Then we continue onwards to the town, this, well, not town, the city of Ubatuba. So the city of Ubatuba is basically the resort slash beach town of Sao Paulo. So basically all the people of Sao Paulo, when they want to go to the beach nearby, they drive 5, 6 hours to the town city of Ubatuba, which we can see in the image below. So it's a bit, it's great for beaches, but it's also amazing for bird watching. So don't worry, none of the people who come to go to the beach are going to be in the national park or visiting the sites where the birds are going to be. From my experience, we do stay at a really nice eco resort while we're here, though. We stay at the 5-star Itamambuca Resort, and it's basically saved the most luxurious hotel for last. So we visit Serra do Mar State Park and the environs. We might visit also Fazenda Angelim. So Fazenda Angelim is an old chocolate. Basically, they grow a cacao. It's a cacao orchard, basically, which has been around for a very, very long time. The cacao trees are very old and covered in bromeliads, and moss and lichens and orchids and all that wonderful epiphytic all the plant life. And it's a great site to see the spotback antrike, which is one of the highlights of going there. We also visit a site called Folha Seca. Folha Seca means dry leaf. And there we might see things like spotted bamboo wren, fork-tailed toady tyrant, another basically set of birds found nowhere else, even within Brazil, or they're very, very local. Folha Seca also has some really nice feeders. Again, more opportunities for photography. The feeders will hold a slightly different variety of birds than we had seen up to this date on the trip, actually. The nice thing about birding in the neotropics is that each site is really different from the next, just by small differences of elevation. So here are some of the wonderful birds in Serra do Mar State Park. This is a really good chance to see redneck tanager, which is one of my favorite tanagers of all. You can't quite see it, but the crown is a sort of a luminescent cobalt blue color. Really, really spectacular. Brazilian tanager, another lowland bird species, not very common because it's commonly caught for the bird trade illegally. But we should get to see it. And down at the bottom, there's the adorable little fork-tailed toady tyrant, or I think it used to be called Kanefer's toady tyrant. Just one of the small little dinky birds we look for while we're exploring the site. Lots of streams, lots of cool fish in the streams. So if you're even beyond birding, there's lots to see. Remember, there's over 2,100 species of butterflies in the Atlantic rainforest. There's many, many primates, 24 species of primate. So it's not just about the birds, although the birds really are spectacularly colorful in this part of the world, arguably some of the most colorful. So that's a good overview of sort of the Atlantic rainforest and sort of the sites we visit on this itinerary. I'm willing to open it up to questions.
Thanks, Carlos. Let's see what we've got here. Hi, Elizabeth. She asked if we will have a 2026 trip. I hope so. This one's new for us. But fingers crossed, we would love to run it again in 2026. Elizabeth Stone said, will you see Brazilian mammals on this trip, or is the trip focused on birds?
So Elizabeth, so if you really want to see Brazilian mammals, I highly recommend doing the Pantanal trip. That is the best trip for mammals. So there are some mammals in the Atlantic rainforest, but they are much, much harder to see Most of the mammals are going to be smaller. There's some marmosets, some squirrels. But if you want to see jaguars, tapirs, giant otters, that kind of thing, you want to do the Pantanal.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Carol says, what is the best time of year? Is there a Pantanal extension? There's not a Pantanal extension. However, this year the our September Pantanal tour is full, but it does line up perfectly with this Atlantic forest trip at the end. So if we do it in 2026, there's a good chance you could pair the two. But Carlos, do you want to speak to the best time of year for this? I mean, we've chosen peak dates for a reason.
Yeah, September is really good time to visit the Atlantic rainforest. You basically want to the issue with July and August is that it's winter. It's not that the birds won't be there. A lot of the birds will be there. Some migrants won't be, but it's you're edging into the subtropics here. So it'll be colder and a lot of the birds will definitely not be as active. So we're going pretty much in the beginning of spring, September. It's actually really good also in October. But once you get into November, it gets really rainy. It will rain a lot. And it will be like it's hard to describe. It's just it'll rain all day, basically, a lot of the
It's
time.
not a friendly shower.
Yeah.
Um, and then Rebecca asked, how long is the trip? Are there extensions? It is 12 days, 11 nights. We don't have an extension for this one. But if you do want to go and add anything on at the beginning or end, we're happy to help point you in the right direction, set you up with the right people. No problem.
You can definitely add more to the trip. This 12-day trip does a pretty good job of going through about half, basically the sort of central half of the Atlantic rainforest. Certain naturalist journeys can help you if you want to do like a little mini extension somewhere else.
Absolutely. Let's see, Elizabeth, how high and how long are we at the highest elevation on the tour?
So the Brazilian highlands are nowhere near as tall as the Andes. So we're looking at more like 5,000 feet, 5,500 feet, 4,000 feet. This is not the Andes. I mean, the tallest mountain in Brazil is found on the border with Guyana in the Guyanan highlands. It's the Brazilian highlands just don't are not that tall.
Any other questions? Carlos, while we're waiting to see if there's any more, what would you say are your top highlights, top three highlights for this trip? Can't see it anywhere else, don't want to miss it. What would you say?
Oh my goodness.
It's a trick question.
So for me as a bird watcher, the main five sort of the other than the tanagers, I love the tanagers. I love Pseudoquat trogon, rufous cap motmot. It's just like for me, there's a lot of analogies from say like Costa Rica or Colombia or Peru, but they're different. So instead of having white neck Jacobin, you get black Jacobin. If instead of lessons motmot, you have rufous cap motmot. But one of the things I really love about bird watching in the Atlantic rainforest is the ant birds. They have really, really good ones. So I call them the big five. One of them is spot-backed. Another one is large-tailed. So imagine large-tailed ant shrike. It's like the size of a jay. It's all black, but with this white star. So basically these white star patterns all over the body of the bird. It's really, really beautiful. And then you have giant ant shrike, which is a large jay-sized ant bird with this long floppy tail and a big crest. Just amazing birds. They just have so much character. So to me, that's a really good highlight. One of the big highlights for me is the quality of the rainforest here. I mean, I think the Atlantic rainforest is some of the most beautiful forest environments I've been to anywhere in the world. Some of the parks that I've been to, like Intervalos, they're just mind-blowingly beautiful. And I say that having been to many throughout Southeast Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, etc.
Do you have any insight to, a pace of the tour? Any little tips for someone who might be considering things? Is it, medium paced, fast paced, leisurely?
I would not call this trip leisurely from judging by what I've read. I would call it moderately paced. There are cultural highlights on the trip. So we do spend some time doing that, but the Atlantic rainforest is also just so rich and biodiverse that there is quite a bit of a bird focus. And that you can see that on the itinerary. It's really hard to get away from a natural history tour when you only have 12 days to see a really, really biodiverse place.
Sure. And one last one from me. Cultural highlights. What were your favorites? Are your favorites?
Um, actually really like the town of Ubatuba. It's a really cool little city. I don't mind the resort atmosphere. It has like a really cool aquarium. It has some really nice historic streets, cobblestone streets. Um, Another cultural highlight for me is the cuisine. There's a lot of really fun Brazilian food. One of my favorites is pão de queijo. I love the cheese bread. And there's feijoada, which is, the beans. And it's fun eating the food there because it's a fusion of so many cultures that have immigrated or been taken to Brazil. So you'll have like couscous, but it's made with corn, or you'll have kibe, like the Lebanese. You'll have sushi, but it's cooked sushi. I mean, it's really, really interesting. And then this whole variety of fruit that doesn't ship well. So the only place to really have it is in Brazil.
Yeah.
So there's a wonderful variety of, food to try and eat, and a lot of the ingredients are really unique.
I will say you should go to Brazil just for the pão de queijo alone. It's this cheesy bread. Oof, you
And
can't,
it's gluten free.
and it's gluten free. And the feijoada as well. Someone asked if we will be posting a reading list. We will. That will be on the web to come. And then Joy said, when you lead a group, do you carry a spotting scope? I found it's an asset. Yes, we will have a scope.
Yes.
Group.
Oh, I have a question. Can you hear
Hi,
me, Carlos?
Thomas.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. I'm not real familiar with the Zoom stuff. But anyway, is the water okay to drink there?
No, I wouldn't drink the water. Yeah, drink bottled water.
And
Yeah.
you'll have all that
Yeah,
with
we'll
you.
have bottled water. Yeah.
And your lodges will have filtered water as well.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
No
Um,
problem.
any special shots like yellow fever or anything like that to Brazil?
Yellow fever.
Yep. Got it, didn't I?
That's it.
Yeah.
That one's not a requirement, though. It's a suggestion, right, Carlos?
Yeah, it's a suggestion. Yeah.
But you just talk to your doctor about what they suggest. If you feel comfortable getting it, absolutely do it.
So I would just check with your insurance provider. Every insurance is different. For example, mine covers
Yes.
it 100%. Every insurance is different. So you're just going to have to do your research on that. Once you take a yellow fever vaccine, it's good for 10 years.
Anything else? Anyone else have any questions? If you do think of something later too, feel free to email myself. It's travel@naturalistjourneys.com. And we're all happy to help.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you
Thank
everyone
you.
for showing up, and
Yeah.
thank you for allowing me to present and introduce the Atlantic rainforest of Brazil. It's a new trip for us, and I'm excited to see it see it be a successful one.
Thank you guys. Have a great night, okay?
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Thank you for the presentation.